Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Age Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 5 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a variety of topics, starting off with some waiver wire pickups from the Monday night matchups. I'm going to be talking about a couple players that had some breakout performances last night, in which you should be potentially picking up this upcoming week. Then after that, we'll talk about some matchups at the running back position, which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season through the first 4 weeks on average in a half PPR scoring format. That's right. Today's rankings will be in a half PPR scoring format like we do usually. Again, rankings are always subject to change. For those of you who are looking for a specific player, you can go down to the description of the video and find timestamps there. While you're down there, if you want, you can either subscribe to the channel for those of you who have not yet already. Again, we're going to be creating fantasy football content here on the daily for the entirety of the 2020 season, so make sure you click that subscribe button. Also, down there in the description of the video, we have my Patreon link for those of you who are trying to find content, rankings, unlimited questions answered. There is a different alternative for extra content. Outside of that, again, after we cover after we cover the matchups at the running back position, we will cover my half PPR top 36 running back rankings as we usually do, as they are to the left of me on the screen. So again, thank you guys for the incredible support coming out on Sunday mornings, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for Kickoff with Kirchhoff. We'll do that every Sunday for the entirety of the season, so I appreciate you guys coming by, supporting the channel. Outside of that, we're good to go. Make sure you click that like button today. Again, there's typically like 40,000 of you that watch this video, and we only get 1,000 likes. Guys, for those of you who are listening right now who have not subscribed yet, you got to click that button. And if you don't click the like button, I'm telling you, I know it seems like one like doesn't make a difference, but if we can get to 2,000-3,000 likes, this channel is going to pop. I'm telling you, it only takes one click. It does not hurt you at all. It helps me a bunch, so do me that solid. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go and start off by talking about some waiver wire pickups from yesterday's games. The first game from Monday night was the New England Patriots playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. In that game, a couple prospects that popped. Mecole Hardman getting a little bit more work in the offense, getting more targets. That is a guy that I want to keep my eye on and potentially pick up this upcoming week. Also on the other side of the football, Damien Williams, who I mentioned yesterday, ended up going from IR to being active because they sent Sony Michel to the IR with that quad injury. So Damien Williams comes in, has a 100-yard rushing game. I mean, it pretty much stands exactly where he was on pace. I mean, during the preseason and the training camp, he was pretty much slated to be the number one running back of that offense. I'm glad that he took the job. Even with splitting snaps with James White and Jerrick Burkhead, he was able to have himself a pretty good performance. This upcoming week they play against Denver should be nice for him. That's another option. In the the later night game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Green Bay Packers, of course, Julio Jones unfortunately got injured during the game, re-aggravated that hamstring injury. Very unfortunate. And also Calvin Ridley, nowhere to be found, 5 targets, 0 receptions. Zacchaeus, the other wide receiver outside of Russell Gage in that offense, got himself 8 targets, 8 receptions. So that's an option if in fact Julio's going to miss more time, or potentially Calvin Ridley could miss more time as the weeks go on. But again, another option there. On the other side of the football, Robert Tonyan, he popped off. 3 touchdowns. That's 5 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. A 30-point fantasy point performance in a half PPR. You love to see it. I mean, you would think that Marquez Valdes-Scantling would have a great game, but instead it's Jamal Williams and Robert Tonyan just ripping off for incredible games. I'm not complaining. I'm perfectly fine with that. Another tight end option that we got to keep our eye on and go and potentially pick up this upcoming week will probably be my number one tight end pickup. But again, he's on a bye week this upcoming week. The Green Bay Packers and the Lions are on bye week, so you're going to pick him up for the potential of the future. All right, so let's go ahead and move on and start talking about some running back matchups going into week 5. Again, this is how many points opposing defenses have been giving up to running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. The Las Vegas Raiders giving up the most points to opposing running backs than the Carolina Panthers, Green Bay Packers, Houston Texans, Detroit Lions. Again, the Packers and Lions are on bye weeks this week, so those beautiful matchups at the running back position will not be able to take advantage of. But again, looking at the teams that are giving up a lot of points, Miami plays against San Francisco. We have a returning Raheem Mostert this week and Jerrick McKinnon in that backfield. The Tennessee Titans, they take on a pretty good offense with the Buffalo Bills. Devin Singletary seems like he's getting everything going, having a rushing touchdown this past week. Everything's kind of going in his momentum. The Arizona Cardinals, they themselves have been struggling. I mean, last week, Mike Davis and Reggie Bonifant both went off on them. So again, When they take on the New York Jets, probably nothing's going to happen, but it's a team to keep an eye on for future games going forward. Again, the New York Jets, they give up a lot of points to the team that they're playing against. Potentially Kenyan Drake or Chase Edmonds can step up to the task at hand. The Houston Texans, maybe David Johnson wants to have a great game this week. That'll be nice. But on the other side, the Jacksonville Jaguars, both these teams playing each other. Both these teams not great against the run. James Robinson, David Johnson could both be great plays this week. Again, the Carolina Panthers take on Todd Gurley. He had a great game last night. Las Vegas Raiders, unfortunately, they have to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are probably going to take care of them, and Clyde Edwards could have a great game. Outside of those, we can go ahead and check out some of the more difficult matchups going into this week. Teams that aren't really giving up many points to opposing running backs thus far this season. Starting off with, of course, the 49ers playing against the Miami Dolphins. That's going to be tough. Pittsburgh Steelers, they take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders has another tough matchup this upcoming week. The Denver Broncos, they will take on the New England Patriots. The Colts, they're going to put the Cleveland Browns rushing attack to the test. So we'll see how that kind of balances itself out. So anyway, just to kind of give you some perspective as to how many points defenses are giving to opposing running backs thus far this season in a half PPR. We've covered that. And now we can go ahead and we could begin talking about my top 36 running back rankings going into week 5 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Starting off with my number 1, it is Alvin Kamara. Shouldn't be a surprise. Alvin Kamara still managed to score 19.4 fantasy points last week, with Latavius Murray stealing 2 goal line touchdowns, and Latavius Murray, if I'm not mistaken, I can confirm this, having 14 rushing attempts on the ground and even having 2 targets through the air, 1 leading to a reception. So even with him nearly splitting all of the total touches in this backfield with Latavius Murray, and even Latavius Murray getting extra work, he still had himself nearly a 20-point fantasy point performance, 19 carries on the ground. That's tied for his pretty much career high. Alvin Kamara has never had 20-plus rushing attempts in his career. He's starting to get there. And of course, they want to slow him down. They don't want to really wear him out this early in the season. But again, he's still an absolute animal. Didn't get as much work in the in the receiving game this week, mainly because they were up so many points. But regardless, you take on the Los Angeles Chargers. What we just saw Ronald Jones do to them kind of just gives me excitement for the potential of Alvin Kamara this week. I mean, Ronald Jones was averaging about 5+ yards per carry against them and had himself 9 targets, 6 receptions. Alvin Kamara will be able to take care of that defense of the Los Angeles Chargers and put up a pretty good performance. He's my number 1 going into week 5. So we move on to our number 2, Ezekiel Elliott. I know Ezekiel Elliott hasn't been performing up to the standard, mainly because this team has been struggling to play defense and keep up in contests, right? I mean, only having 12 rushing attempts for Zeke last week for 54 rushing yards isn't going to cut it. And also him fumbling the last 2 weeks has definitely been a problem for this offense. But again, I'm going to continue to harp on the fact that in the past 2 weeks, he's had a total of 20 targets in the passing game. Just this past week, 8 targets leading to 8 receptions, 71 receiving yards. That is a number that if it continues throughout the season, Zeke is going to continue to be an incredible fantasy play and potentially finish within the top 2 running backs this season. He's number 2 this week because they take on the New York Giants. Again, this Giants defense has been pretty stout against stopping the run, but I expect Ezekiel Elliott and this, Cowboys offensive line and offense not to struggle and get behind too early and be able to run the ball, impose their will, and have themselves a pretty good week. He is my number 2. We move on to number 3, Dalvin Cook. Another one of these running backs that has been having incredible weeks. Just this past week against the Houston Texans, 27 total rushing attempts for 130 rushing yards. Don't forget, the week prior had 180 rushing yards, so he's been just absolutely going off. I had 2 rushing touchdowns this past week, 2 receptions for 16 yards. 27.6 fantasy points. This upcoming week, they take on the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks secondary has been, pretty beat up and hasn't been able to make too many plays as of the last couple of weeks in terms of stopping potent offenses. And I think that the Minnesota Vikings kind of found their, footing this past week in terms of how they're going to approach the rest of the season in using Thielen and Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. But the question remains, is the Seattle Seahawks defense good enough to stop Dalvin Cook? I really don't think anybody really is. It's going to be a tough task at hand to stop Dalvin Cook the way he's been playing the last couple of weeks. They're going to give him the ball nearly 30 times a game. He's going to find success. I'm not worried about him at all in this matchup, and I think should be an exciting one between these two teams. He's my number 3. Clyde Edwards-Helaire makes himself a top 4 running back this week, mainly because of the matchup, because Clyde Edwards hasn't been a world beater as of late. In terms of his overall productivity, last night, against the Patriots, 16 rushing attempts for 64 yards, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 27 yards, only 10.6 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Of course, he scores a touchdown in that game. We're having a different conversation here. But again, he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1, and that's definitely been a problem. hopefully this week against the Las Vegas Raiders, they can take an early lead and go ahead and run the ball, impose their will, like I always talk about with this offensive line that's been playing pretty well in my eyes. I still think that Clyde Edwards had himself a pretty good game yesterday. Just got to continue to pound the rock, get yourselves in situations where late in games you can run the ball and have yourselves a pretty good week for Clyde Edwards. Again, I know he's been struggling, but again, as soon as he starts getting those touchdowns, he gets a little bit more work in the passing game, like we've seen him do, 6 receptions plus. Everything is going to start to click, and his production is going to come through. All right, we move on to number 5, Derrick Henry. Now, I know a lot of people are skeptical on the idea of whether or not the Bills and the Tennessee Titans are going to play this week because of the COVID cases. I'm not really worried about the case. As of right now, it's out of my control. I'm going to rank Derrick Henry where I think he would end up performing if, in fact, the game goes through. If, in fact, we get information down the line later this week that they're not going to be playing that game, then we'll adjust rankings on Sunday morning. But outside of that, Derrick Henry this week, my number 5 running back, plays against the Buffalo Bills. Derrick Henry just had a bye week. Should be comfortable, should be ready to go. His body should be healthy because, again, Derrick Henry in the last couple of weeks has been getting unbelievable touches. Had 87 total touches in the first 3 weeks of the 2020 fantasy football season, which 82 of them were on the ground. And those rushing attempts, those 82 rushing attempts, have led to 319 rushing yards in the first 3 games. So Derrick Henry's definitely been pounding the rock. Again, getting a week off this early is definitely not what they wanted, but eventually this is kind of going to give them a little bit of a reset in their health department. Take care of any nagging injuries, continue to pound the rock. I expect this matchup to be a higher scoring one, but back and forth to say the very least. And Derrick Henry should be able to at least have himself another one of these great fantasy point performances of putting up 20 plus points with the rushing attempts, the potential of the goal line, and all of that combined should be a great play. Move on to our last of the top 6 options, Jonathan Taylor. I know that Jonathan Taylor has been a little bit disappointing, similar to a Clyde Edwards. Again, these are rookie running backs. They're still trying to get their rhythm, but in this entire process, they're eventually going to find their footing and be dominant backs. I think the only difference between these guys being consistent backs or not is touchdowns. That's literally it. We see Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, they're always scoring touchdowns on a weekly basis. But, Clyde Edwards and Jonathan Taylor, they've struggled because of those lack of touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor is still getting a good amount of touches, 18 total touches this past week, 79 total yards. Sure, against the Chicago Bears, that wasn't a great number. But against Cleveland, I think he'll be able to perform at a pretty great level. He's going to have to step up. But again, it's just a matter of game script. I mean, this team hasn't really been asked to do much. Their defense is locking teams down, and they haven't been able to really get anything going offensively. A lot of field goals from Rodrigo Blankenship, another one of these guys that if they're available in your league, you have to have already picked him up. He's been putting up double-digit fantasy points at the kicker position for the last 3 weeks plus. So again, Jonathan Taylor, I believe in the process. I think he'll be fine. He's my number 6 going into week 5. We move on to number 7, Chris Carson. With the knee sprain that he sustained against the Dallas Cowboys last week, and him being limited the whole week, I thought, you know what? Let's just be safe. Let's not push him here. They probably won't need him. Well, in fact, they did need him. He sustained, a pretty big hit in the first half, went into concussion protocol at halftime, still returned in the second half, 16 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 receptions on 4 targets for 20 yards, 23.5 fantasy point game, plays against Minnesota. Again, Minnesota's been struggling against the run. Every team that they've played against has pretty much run on them with relative ease. So again, I expect Chris Carson in this offense, if in fact he's going to get this much work going forward. Carlos Hyde got injured. That was actually a pretty good thing for Carson going into this last week's matchup. But again, Chris Carson should be a pretty good play. He's my number 7 again this week because the offense is very capable of scoring. They play in a very easy matchup in my eyes, and should be able to take advantage of it this upcoming week. Minnesota, again, isn't something that I'm too worried about. And Seattle plays at home, so they don't have to make the trip across the U.S. this week. All right, we move on. We talk about number 8, Mike Davis, a former Seattle Seahawks running back. But Mike Davis has been unbelievable for the Carolina Panthers. It's making me think that perhaps Christian McCaffrey isn't the greatest running back. Sure, Christian McCaffrey has a lot of skills and a lot of intangibles that you just can't teach a running back. But The fact that Mike Davis is coming in here just this past week, 16 rushing attempts for 84 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 27 receiving yards, 19.6 fantasy points. That's back-to-back weeks of 19 fantasy points plus. This upcoming week takes on the Atlanta Falcons. I'm sorry, Mike Davis is 100% a top back this upcoming week. And until he is supplanted as the starter with Christian McCaffrey returning from the ankle injury, he is a top player every single week from here on out. He's proven it. He gets to work in the passing game. In a full PPR, he's even more valuable in my eyes. But as of right now, in a half PPR, my number 8 running back, this shouldn't be a surprise for many of you. He's scoring touchdowns, getting receptions. You can't ask for any more, especially in going into a great matchup this upcoming week. James Conner's my number 9 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had themselves a little bit of a bye week, but it wasn't really considered a bye week because they prepared to play, but unfortunately didn't get the chance to. This upcoming week, they take on the Philadelphia Eagles, and I understand it's a tougher matchup, but let's put this in perspective. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense has produced back-to-back-to-back, 3 in a row, 100-yard rushing games from their starting running backs. Now, in the past 2 weeks, it's been James Conner. In week 1, it was Benny Snell. This team runs the rock as effectively as just about anybody else in the National Football League. James Conner, when he's healthy, has been unstoppable, put up 2 20-point performances in the past 2 weeks, gets work in the passing game very easily. And I understand Philadelphia has got a great, front 7 with Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, these defensive linemen that are getting after it. But as of right now, I expect James Conner and this Pittsburgh Steelers offense with a little bit of rest this past week to take advantage of that and be able to, at least exert a little bit of dominance on this Philadelphia defense. Moving on to number 10, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt will be the starting running back of the Cleveland Browns going forward. And as of right now, it's only going to be a matter of where is Kareem Hunt kind of granted opportunity. Is he going to get more work in the passing game? Because again, this past week didn't get any work in the passing game because they were up so many points. But as a starting running back of the Cleveland Browns, you're probably going to have the upside of a top 5 performance every single time. With Nick Chubb gone for the next 3 weeks, Kareem Hunt is an automatic top 10 play every single week. This past week had 19 points. Again, only 11 touches on the ground. That's all he had. But 71 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Indianapolis' defense has been fantastic. Now, that being said, Kareem Hunt and this Cleveland Browns offense, they've been running it on just about anybody, but who have they really played? I think this is going to be the true test for them this upcoming week. Indianapolis versus Cleveland. It's going to be back and forth. Either way, I still think Kareem Hunt finds himself a lot of value, regardless of game script, on the ground, through the air. He's going to be incredible. So he's my number 10 this week. We move on to Raheem Mostert, coming back from the MCL injury potentially this week. If Raheem Mostert is cleared and ready to play and is practicing this week, I 100% want to play him against the Miami Dolphins. I have a lot of confidence in him. We talked about it a little bit with Jeff Wilson during the Hidden Gems video. Jeff Wilson, by the way, disappeared. Went from having 17 touches in 1 week to like 3. So be it. Thanks, Kyle Shanahan. Regardless, the starting running back of the San Francisco 49ers for the last 4 weeks has consistently produced fantasy points. Regardless of whether it was Raheem Mostert or Jerrick McKinnon, these guys have just been scoring. Jerrick McKinnon has scored a touchdown each of the last 4 weeks. The touchdowns are there, the opportunity is there, and the game script and the game plan is typically to run the ball. With getting Jimmy Garoppolo back, George Kittle back, Deebo Samuel back, this offense opens up even more and makes it even more threatening for opposing defenses to try to have to cover everybody. Mostert should be a fantastic play against Miami if healthy and ready to go. Moving on to our number 12 and the last of our top 12 running backs, we have Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs has been pretty inconsistent as of late. Again, the first 2 weeks of the season had himself a total of 52 total rushing attempts. The past 2 weeks, about 31. Now, that is a significant drop-off, but it has to do a lot with the game script. In the first 2 weeks, Carolina and the New Orleans Saints. Those were matchups that they were winning majority of the time. Then you go into the New England Patriots matchup and the Buffalo Bills matchup, and you're losing for majority of those games. That is definitely going to put the Las Vegas Raiders, it always keeps catching me there, into a situation in which they have to throw the ball for majority of the second half. And as we've seen, Josh Jacobs is getting work in the passing game a little bit more than last year, but he is not giving enough opportunity to be a relevant back in the second half of these football games. Getting the ball 18 times in a game for any other running back is fine, but if he's not going to score touchdowns, then you're not going to find consistency at the fantasy position here for Josh Jacobs. As of right now, this upcoming week, they play against Kansas City. They could get boat raced. I mean, they could put up 21 points on them hard, and we have Josh Jacobs struggling to find opportunity in the second half. Or we could see something similar to what we did last year, where Josh Jacobs in this offense comes out, performs well, and gets some pretty good production. I mean, we've seen Josh Jacobs average more than 4 yards per carry against Kansas City in the past. Almost put up 100 yards in one of the games. In the other game, eclipsed 100 yards against Kansas City last year. So again, he's capable of running on them. They just got to give him the opportunity, got to keep themselves in games. All right, let's go ahead and move on to number 13 here. Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, of course, incredible performance. No one's ever going to take that away from him. 39.1 fantasy points, 151 rushing yards on 25 rushing attempts, 2 rushing touchdowns, and then he got himself incredible work in the passing game. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 30 yards, and a receiving touchdown. This upcoming week, they take on the Baltimore Ravens. Now, here's the thing. What I just saw Antonio Gibson do to the Baltimore Ravens and also J.D. McKissic gives me a little bit of confidence in Joe Mixon, because in the past, I would have thought, you know what, let's not even play a running back against Baltimore. It's not that easy of a matchup. It's probably going to be a little sketchy. But from what I saw Antonio Gibson kind of do Sunday, kind of gives me some more confidence. Now, Joe Mixon last year had a little bit of a two-faced scenario when it comes to playing against Baltimore. In one game, he had like 8 rushing attempts for 10 yards and was completely worthless. In another game, he had himself 30 rushing attempts and over 100 rushing yards. Now, hopefully this past week's performance gives Zach Taylor, the offensive coordinator and head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, a little bit of a refresher. Oh, Joe Mixon's actually a good running back. Maybe we should use him 20 plus times a game. Hopefully the refresher kind of comes to him, because if it does, Joe Mixon could be a great play this week. That's why I have him at 13. If Joe Mixon could take 9 of his points from last week and use it this week, great. He'd be a better play. But I don't want to hear anything about Joe Mixon being underrated this week. Trust me, he's not going to be a 39-point monster every single week. We got to relax on that, all right? Anyway, we move on to our next running back, James Robinson. So, playing against Houston Texans, fantastic matchup. Again, James Robinson has been given pretty ample opportunity thus far this season. Just this past week, 21 total touches, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 32 yards through the air, 17 touches on the ground, 75 yards. Great. If he had a touchdown, would have been an even better play. I think against Houston this week, we'll probably be able to get that. The yards, the opportunity, they are there. When you're getting over 100 total yards from scrimmage, beautiful. You add a touchdown, you're a 16-point play, and even better than majority of the pack. So again, James Robinson, another fantastic play as my number 14 this week. Moving on to Devin Singletary as my number 15. With Zach Moss out for the last 2 weeks, Singletary has really stepped up, getting himself a lot of touches. Again, 5 receptions last week. That's a great sign to see. 18 rushing attempts on the ground. Yard per carry average wasn't incredible considering the matchup against the Raiders. But again, this isn't a running team. They are right now predicated on letting Josh Allen just dominate the defenses with his arm. But again, having himself a touchdown is a little promising going forward. This upcoming week, taking on Tennessee. Again, another one of these defenses that isn't great against the run, isn't great defense overall. They have a bye week, but to be honest, they're going to be missing a lot of pieces. And with this whole COVID situation, I don't know exactly how they're going to show up this upcoming week, but hopefully this game goes through, because Devin Singletary should be another one of these great plays. Ronald Jones, Thursday Night Football, playing against the Chicago Bears. Ronald Jones was incredible this past week against the Los Angeles Chargers, which is a great defense in terms of stopping the run. But he imposed as well. 20 rushing attempts for 111 yards, 9 targets, 6 receptions for 17 receiving yards, and nearly 16 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Now, with Leonard Fournette missing this past week and them having a short week playing on Thursday, Leonard Fournette could potentially miss once again. LaShawn McCoy got injured. He could potentially miss. They did have Keyshawn Vaughn getting a little bit more involved, but it should be all Ronald Jones all day this upcoming Thursday, because again, if Mike Evans potentially misses, with Chris Godwin out, O.J. Howard out with Achilles injury for the rest of the season, there is a potential that it's going to be all Ronald Jones all Thursday night, and that's what I'm expecting. Run the ball, impose your will, kill clock, take the lead, and dominate. So that's why I have Ronald Jones at 16. Moving on to Todd Gurley at number 17. Had himself another great week. What is that? 4 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. That's what you want to see from Todd Gurley. I mean, that's where he finds his value. Touchdown upside. 16 carries for 57 yards. 1 catch on 1 target, 6 receiving yards. I'm not interested in that. It's touchdown or bust for Todd Gurley. He found himself 2 touchdowns. Plays against Carolina. Very favorable matchup. If they can just continue to figure it out, and Todd Gurley continues to score touchdowns on the goal line, he's good to go. Especially with all the receiver injuries, I mean, they're going to have to lean on him to at least be productive this upcoming week. Him and Brian Hill could be a pretty good tandem in terms of overall production for the Atlanta Falcons against Carolina. David Johnson is my number 18. Again, David Johnson has to step up. Eventually, he's going to find his footing, because the first 4 weeks in terms of matchups hasn't been great. Playing against Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Kansas City in week 1. Kansas City in week 1, he was great. Minnesota this past week, if he catches that speed option on third down from Deshaun Watson near the goal line, he scores. He beats him to the edge. He scores a touchdown there. And you have yourself another great week. So again, don't completely turn yourself off to David Johnson. He is going to find production, especially against Jacksonville, who just gave up 39 fantasy points to Joe Mixon of all people. So again, David Johnson's got a lot of value going forward. He's my number 18. Number 19, Antonio Gibson. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Playing against Baltimore last week, incredible game. Overall, fantastic. 3 rushing touchdowns in a row, back-to-back weeks. Has scored a rushing touchdown on the goal line. He is the goal line back for this team. It is no longer Peyton Barber, thank goodness. We've established that. On top of that, he's getting work in the passing game. This team is always in negative game scripts. The Washington football team have found their starting running back going forward as of right now. You love to see it with Antonio Gibson. And as of right now, this upcoming week, they take on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, it is a tougher matchup, but in terms of stopping the run, they haven't been a great team. I think there's a very good potential where Antonio Gibson finds himself in the end zone again, finds himself getting at least 50, 60 total yards on the ground. And then everything in through the air that he gets in terms of receptions with the negative game script, that's just going to be gravy. Again, this is a receiver from college that had more receptions than he had rushing attempts in his final year there. So, to be honest, should be good to go going forward. 20, Melvin Gordon. Playing against New England's a little tough, and I'm a little worried about the situation because, again, I don't know who's going to be playing quarterback. Noah Fant's going to be out. And I know that they're saying Drew Lock has a 50-50 chance. They're probably not going to play him. So, again, I think the New England Patriots are probably going to just stack the box because they have such a good secondary. They'll be able to take care of Judy and Tim Patrick. I'm not really concerned about that. It's all about stopping Melvin Gordon. I think they'll be able to do that to an extent. But again, Melvin Gordon's a talented enough running back that regardless of everything going on, he will break out runs. Just like last week against the Jets, when all else was failing, he was still able to make plays and break out and have himself a good overall performance. So should be a good play this week at number 20. We move on to Jerrick McKinnon as my number 21. Again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier with Raheem Mostert, Jerrick McKinnon has been a 10-plus point fantasy player for the last 4 weeks minimum. Scored a touchdown every single week. That upside is always going to be nice, but if he can't find that upside, then it's going to be a little bit troubling for him. That being said, Jerrick McKinnon should be playing the Tevin Coleman role going forward. He should be playing the Jerrick McKinnon role, which is I'm going to catch the ball out of this backfield and be the relevant PPR back. 8 targets, 7 receptions, 43 receiving yards this past Sunday on Sunday Night Football against the Eagles. This upcoming week takes on Miami. This is too easy of a matchup. I think both these running backs will be relevant. That's why Jerrick McKinnon still stays within the top 21 rankings this upcoming week with Raheem Mostert still coming back and taking charge of the backfield. Damien Harris is my number 22. Taking on Denver, again, it's a tougher matchup, but I'm not really too concerned about it. I think the way that Damien Harris is running, again, he needed to get a little bit of the cobwebs off because he didn't have a preseason. He didn't have a regular season thus far. That was the first action that he saw all season long in terms of full speed, high octane offense. He looked a little rusty in the beginning, was looking like he was just hard set on following his fullback and following his offensive lineman instead of trying to be able to break out after he gets to the second level. Eventually, in the second half, got himself going, had a 41-yard burst of a run. That's eventually going to continue to lead to success. I'm excited for the future of Damien Harris, and I think this upcoming week against Denver, regardless of who's playing at quarterback for the Patriots, they look decent against a very good team. So going forward should be a good play. He's my number 22. Moving on to 23, Myles Sanders. I'm sorry, guys, but Myles Sanders up against Pittsburgh is not an exciting matchup, nothing that I want to play. Again, Pittsburgh's got a really good offense, and they got a really good defense. They are not a team that you want to mess around with. And I think with all the troubles that Carson Wentz has faced, this offensive line has faced, and to be honest, Myles Sanders has faced in terms of opportunity. Getting himself a couple targets and receptions here and there is going to help. But if he's not finding the end zone, if he's not in a rhythm of being able to get consistent yards, it's going to be tough, especially with a negative game script coming down the line. I'm not 100% certain of what we'll find out of a guy like Myles Sanders this week. Just being precautious. Because it is a tough matchup to say the least. 24, we have Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram is getting less touches than Gus Edwards. That's the fact. But Mark Ingram scores touchdowns. And if he can score a touchdown this week, playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the worst run-stopping defenses in the National Football League, then so be it. I mean, this last week, 8 rushing attempts for 34 rushing yards. Okay, 4.0 yards per carry average, a little bit higher than that. But okay, that's not good. Like literally, I can find another one. I found James White with 3 rushing attempts for 21 yards. Just as good. Give him more opportunity. But the fact that Mark Ingram scores a touchdown gets him over that 10-point hump. I'm really worried about these running backs in his backfield. I leave him at 24 because I assume that he can get it done. But as of right now, I'm just hoping that they give somebody else a job and just give it to them fully. But I don't think that'll be the case. Darrell Henderson's my number 25. He's a great play. Again, Darrell Henderson kind of disappeared this past week against the New York Giants, mainly because I don't even know. Like, it seemed like it was going to be all Darrell Henderson from the past 2 weeks of performances, him taking over the job, really kind of moving Malcolm Brown out of the situation, but then he ends up disappearing. Darrell Henderson, only 8 rushing attempts for 22 yards, only 1 target for 16 yards, a 4-point fantasy point performance against the New York Giants, takes on the Washington football team this week. I honestly think that this is a pretty good matchup, and it should be, some successful plays here and there for Darrell Henderson, but I've ranked him this low because I'm not 100% certain of what we're going to find. Is it going to be Cam Akers eventually coming back and taking the job, or are we going to just continue to see a committee of where they're just rolling with the hot hand? Because if it's a hot hand situation, then I can't trust that enough to put him in my starting roles, potentially in a flex position, but I've got to be desperate to do so. But as of this week, I think it's a good enough matchup where they're going to run the ball for the majority of the game. Hopefully they don't play down to the Washington football team, because if they do, one of these times they're going to get bopped by a team that they're not supposed to be bopped by, per se. But either way, he's my number 25. Moving on to 26. I know a lot of you don't trust Kenyan Drake, but he plays the New York Jets. It's a good matchup. He should be fine. If he gets more work, eventually he's going to break out. But again, you don't have to play him. If you're a Kenyan Drake owner and you want to sell him, you can go sell him. I don't know if you're going to get pennies on the dollar, but as of right now, Kenyan Drake, I still think is a decent option in this offense. I'm just waiting for him to have himself a pretty good performance one of these weeks. I don't know if I can afford to start him, but I think eventually, in specific scenarios down the line when bye weeks start to hit me, I'm going to have to. Moving on to David Montgomery. He takes on a Thursday night matchup against Tampa Bay. Again, that's one of the best run-stopping defenses in terms of rushing yards per game for opposing running backs. I'm very, hesitant to throw David Montgomery out there on Thursday night. Again, him getting work in the passing game is definitely going to help his overall value. 6 targets, 3 receptions, 30 yards. That's fantastic. Caught himself a 2-point conversion, but against Indianapolis was only averaging 2.7 yards per carry. This offensive line is doing him no favors, and he himself isn't that kind of a playmaker to be able to just take on anybody and just perform regardless of the matchup. So as of right now, I'm a little worried about the matchup. So there you go. David Montgomery at 27. 28, James White. Glad to see James White back. Honestly, with everything that's happened to him, I'm glad that he's back with the team, ready to go. Yesterday, pretty good game. In terms of a full PPR, James White would be a fantastic play. He had 7 receptions for 38 yards yesterday. Sure, he didn't score. He didn't score a touchdown, but he still got himself some work on the ground, 21 rushing yards on 3 rushing attempts. If he's in a full PPR, he's a relevant 10-plus point play. Gets a touchdown, has even more upside. This upcoming week against Denver, if in fact his offense stalls because of the quarterback play, whether it's Stidham or Hoyer, probably Jarrett Stidham at quarterback, hopefully they're going to be able to just dump it off to James White. They're using him a lot in this offense, whether it's out wide or out of the backfield. He's eventually going to find his footing and be a 10-point guy every week. We find ourselves with Malcolm Brown at 29. Again, like I mentioned with Darrell Henderson a little bit earlier, we don't know what we're going to find out of this offense, but Malcolm Brown led the team in rushing attempts this past week, 9 total carries for 37 yards, had himself 6 targets, 5 receptions for 19 receiving yards. If you're going to get that much work out of the passing game in comparison to, Darrell Henderson, okay, you find yourself some value. Against Washington, I could see it being a little bit of a successful mix around, but again, these 2 Rams running backs, they scare me. And that's why they sit in this 25 to 30 range, because I'm not 100% certain of what we're going to see out of this group. But one of them is going to eventually catch fire, or maybe both of them. You're just going to have to wait and see. All right, we go ahead and move on to number 30, D'Ernest Johnson. Now, as of right now with Johnson, he's going to be playing the Nick Chubb role. I think against Indianapolis, it's going to be a tough matchup, but he's going to be asked to, carry the ball 10 plus times. If in fact he falls into the end zone, I'm not going to be surprised, because again, he will be playing that role. Kareem Hunt, again, is going to be playing outside, playing in the slot. Wherever they move around as a receiving back, they use 2 back sets. Does not really matter to me. I think D'Ernest Johnson honestly has value. That's why I suggested him as a pickup this upcoming week. And for the next coming weeks going forward, should be a pretty good play. Josh Kelley at 31. You play against New Orleans. I'm not excited about it. Unless you're getting receptions out of the backfield, which I don't think he's going to get Eckler-esque receptions. I think those are going to go to Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry. I'm thinking Kelley is just the number 31 this week. He's a decent play. I know he's being projected like 11, 12 fantasy points and a half PPR right now at Yahoo. That just seems like a little too much out of hand right now. I'm not 100% buying into it, but we'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of the New Orleans Saints, Latavius Murray. What we just saw Ronald Jones do to that defense is what Latavius Murray is going to potentially have the opportunity of doing this upcoming week. If Alvin Kamara is still in that backfield and going to touch the ball, 10, 20 plus times a game, they're going to obviously get Latavius Murray some work so that you're not running Alvin Kamara into the ground. You need him healthy for the entire year if you want to capture a championship, whether it's in the NFC South or in the NFC in general to try to get to the Super Bowl. I think Michael Thomas probably misses. They're going to run the ball even more this week and potentially have themselves some success. Latavius Murray at 32 shouldn't be a surprise. Devonta Freeman making the list for the first time in a long time. This upcoming week for the New York Giants should be pretty good against the Rams. Again, his whole usage is going to be pretty much in the passing game. That's where he shined the most last year in terms of the offense for the Falcons. Again, this past week, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 35 receiving yards, 33 rushing yards for 11 total touches on the ground. 15 touches for this, New York Giants offense. I'll take it, to be honest. So this upcoming week against Dallas, that's not a good defense. They just ran 300 yards on them. If the Giants step up and play up to the task at hand, Devonta Freeman could be a value. Moving on to Myles Gaskin. Okay, so Gaskin plays against the 49ers. I'm not 100% convinced at the value there. But again, if he's going to catch the ball 4 or 5 times in a game for 40 yards, gets him 40 yards on the ground like he usually does, he ends up being an honest 10-point back. So the potential's there. There's no touchdown upside, so we kind of downgrade him. But again, there's always the potential that this team kind of falls apart because the 49ers are starting to really cook as of the last couple of weeks. I know that they got smacked on Sunday Night Football, but eventually they're going to find their footing defensively when their players start coming back from injury. I know they were missing their 2 starting cornerbacks. They're missing a linebacker, a defensive end. When D Ford comes back, when Greenlaw comes back, this defense is going to be far more capable of stopping offenses. So hopefully this is the week that they come back from injury. Chase Edmonds is my number 35. Like I mentioned during the waiver wire segment yesterday, Kenyan Drake is eventually going to lose his job. I'm assuming it'll be the Chase Edmonds. Edmonds is going to be given the opportunity to step up, especially in the passing game. If he takes advantage of it like he has in the last couple of weeks, he should have some good value against the Jets. I think Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback for that Jets team this week. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for this offense to have themselves some pretty good performances. The last running back I wanted to mention is Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines still has value. I looked at a bunch of other running backs. I looked at a lot of names, and a lot of them just didn't really pop off the screen for me. Like Royce Freeman, Alexander Madison, Chris Thompson, Burkhead, Brian Hill. Like maybe Brian Hill could be in this spot, but to be honest, if this becomes a matchup where Phillip Rivers and this team needs to come back in the game, you're just going to grant more and more opportunity for a player like Nyheim Hines to eventually get himself more involved. Only had 3 receptions, but again, had 9 rushing attempts this past week. He's getting himself 10 plus touches a week. Eventually, he's going to be able to score on one of these, or at least having a bigger overall performance in terms of yardage on the ground and through the air. Those are my top 36 running back rankings going into week 5. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. Later this afternoon, I will be putting out a video in terms of trade targets, players that you should be going after, buying low on for the upcoming weeks. We've finished 1 month of the season thus far. Again, appreciate you guys stopping by, watching the channel, supporting the channel. Thank you, everybody. Check out for that video. It'll be coming out a little bit later this afternoon. I'm a little bit behind schedule because, again, 2 videos in a day typically isn't what I do, but I'm trying my best to try to get you guys this content. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until later today, I'll see you guys. Peace.